Rainbows, miracles in the sky, symbol of pride in Pride Month, which we've been celebrating. Why would an ephemeral symbol like a rainbow be such a stalwart symbol of God's covenant with people in the ancient era? Why would it be such a strong symbol now of diversity and inclusion? The church I'm serving now at this moment, Touchstone United Church of Christ in Boerne, Texas, not a blue bastion, Boerne, Texas, a church start from about 3 years ago. Touchstone is seeking boldly to be a symbol of inclusion. The church I'm a member of held an interfaith worship service on Thursday the 6th. I'm anticipating now being a part of it, which I will have been a part of it, God willing, by the time you receive this message. The rainbow covenant of God in the ancient reading promised that God would not destroy the people and every living thing by flood again. God didn't say anything about us self-destroying. God didn't say anything about fire or war or climate crises. God just promised not by flood. Recently, in my part of Texas, we've had torrential floods. I wondered about that, but God promised, no, not by flood. I won't do it. I won't do it. The rainbow movement of inclusion and becoming proud of who you are, regardless of where you fit on a spectrum of gender identity, has been a powerful movement for people. I must confess, though, for me, when that came about, I rather wondered, why would people even bother to be concerned about that? Here's why. I was lucky. As a kid, I had very forward-thinking parents. Their view of that was something like Lady Patrick Campbell's was. She was a correspondent with George Bernard Shaw. And she said once, she really didn't care what people did as long as they didn't do it in the street and frighten the horses. That was her tolerant view. That's what I grew up with. And because I was a theater brat from a very early age, I was privileged to be amongst creative people in a field that was a bastion and a beacon for other creative people who were not binary and found a world where their gifts were celebrated and, in fact, used by the straight world for entertainment and inspiration. So it was a shock to me later to realize that other people didn't look at things that way. But I got on board when I realized the oppression was real and the discrimination was real. And I learned about the spectrum of sexuality along with everyone else. I learned about other spectrums as well. And I got to a pet peeve, the neurodiversity spectrum, which I belong somewhere on that may not be right in the middle. I'm a little bit peeved when people talk about folks with varieties of Asperger's or autism, and they just say, well, they're on the spectrum. Shut up. Everybody's on a spectrum. Don't act like you know what you're talking about. Don't dismiss and discount with that kind of language something you may not know much about. Here's my point. There's not just one spectrum, for starters. And second of all, you're on a spectrum too, kids. The metaphor of a rainbow as inclusive, as covering a spectrum, look at the one I had, as covering a spectrum and going off beyond the spectrum into the infrared into the ultrasonic, the subsonic, if it's sound, beyond comprehension, is a good one. And it needs to be painted boldly across all of our expectations. I believe that once we realize, the more we realize that we don't know what we don't know, we will be better off as a species. I love to get message. I get the newsletter from the McDonald Observatory out in West Texas, because that's a place my husband and I used to like to go. He was an astronomy buff and he loves to look at the stars. I like to do that too. I don't see them very well, but it puts my little fears and idiosyncrasies into perspective in a hurry. I look at the stars and then I think about my troubles and they look different. It's not to discount or diminish the real concerns, the real spiritual longings and yearnings of the human soul, because there's something magnificent about that too. We don't know where the human soul begins or ends either. And the more people look into the depths of the universe through the Hubble, the more we realize how much farther it goes. A rainbow spectrum of the soul could go farther than we know. And even if that's too dizzying a thought, the visible spectrum of the soul is quite wonderful. Parts of it are dark. Parts of it are bright. It isn't just black and white. Now, the opening thoughts were about leading us from death to life, from falsehood to truth. Sounds like a binary, doesn't it? Sounds like a pair of binaries. But it's not. Because you don't get from one of those things to another just in a leap. You get to them by living through them, through processes. We know that the processes of finding peace or love or justice are long and difficult. They don't happen in a heartbeat, darn it. I wish they did. But what we can do when we realize those are the ways we want to go is try to accept that they don't happen overnight. But on the other hand, it gives us a good reason to stay on the planet. If we got it all done tomorrow, what would we do for fun the next day? So we're here to apparently enjoy these nuances, these spectrums, as long as we can, and look beyond them, because that's what we do. We can't help it. Beyond the rainbow is where we look. But while we're here, let's look for people who are following those rainbows. Let's do our best to live in the nuances. Let's celebrate the wins when we have them. And even if we're the kind of person who sees that rainbow and hears God's promise and thinks, you know what, I'm going to build a bigger boat anyway. Let's go ahead and look to the rainbow and keep following it. Follow the rainbow. There are infinite rainbows. Pick one, follow it. Amen. And now I beseech you to hear this benediction. It's the one I always give these days. Everything will be all right in the end. And if it isn't all right, it means it's not the end. Go in peace. And in your sanctuary, you will extinguish the flame and say these words together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Please enjoy the postlude.